It was supposed to be the most critical dinner of the year for a billion-dollar tech merger. In the glittering ballroom of a luxury hotel, executives in tailored suits exchanged calculated smiles while servers glided between tables. At the head of the room sat a man whose presence commanded attention, the foreign investor everyone wanted to impress. But there was a problem no one in the room had prepared for. He was deaf. As the negotiations began, people ignored his hesitant attempts to communicate, laughing awkwardly as if he wasn't even there. No one realized that the future of the entire deal would hinge on an unexpected voice, a quiet, watchful girl in the corner. The gala had been organized to welcome the visiting investor. This self-made billionaire had built a global empire despite losing his hearing at a young age. He had flown in to finalize a deal that could change the future of clean energy technology. But as he entered the room, it became painfully clear that most of the hosts had underestimated the challenge of including him. The company's executives were focused on delivering dazzling speeches and polished presentations, but none had considered hiring an interpreter. They assumed that their slides and gestures would be enough. As introductions dragged on, the man remained polite, nodding occasionally, but his eyes often drifted toward the floor. Among the many staff rushing quietly in the background was a black maid named Clarissa. For years she had worked behind the scenes at such events, unnoticed by the influential people who dined just a few feet away. Her teenage daughter, Amara, often accompanied her to help clear tables. Amara loved languages and had taught herself American Sign Language after seeing online videos of deaf creators. As the night went on, Amara noticed something the others missed: the billionaire's subtle frustration each time someone spoke to him without even trying to make eye contact. She could sense the loneliness behind his dignified posture. Meanwhile, the executives were growing impatient. Without the investors' direct engagement, their carefully rehearsed pitch was falling flat. In the quiet spaces between serving dishes, Amara's fingers itched to form the signs she had practiced in front of a mirror so many times. She hesitated. Who would listen to a maid's daughter in a room full of CEOs? Yet she couldn't shake the thought that someone needed to break the barrier that the others had chosen to ignore. The dinner progressed, but the atmosphere became strained. The visiting billionaire remained reserved, offering only brief nods while the executives exchanged worried glances. They tried to impress him with charts and figures, but their words never truly reached him. Some whispered that he was being difficult, while others dismissed his silence as a sign of arrogance. In truth, he was evaluating not only the numbers but also the people, and what he saw disappointed him. Their inability to treat him as an equal partner rather than a problem to be worked around weighed heavily on his mind. At one point, a senior executive made a dismissive comment, not realizing the investor could read lips. His expression hardened ever so slightly, but he stayed silent. The subtle moment went unnoticed by most in the room, except Amara. From her position near the service station, she saw his clenched hand resting on the table. Her heart beat faster. She understood enough of his experience to recognize the sting of being sidelined. When dessert was served, the tension reached its peak. The CEO of the host company presented a final summary, trying to rally the room with grand words. The investor looked down at his hands, as if shutting out the noise around him. That was when Amara made her decision. Summoning all her courage, she stepped away from her mother's side and approached the table. The room fell silent for a moment as the unexpected figure appeared between the executives. She raised her hands and began to sign. The investor's eyes widened in surprise. Then, for the first time all evening, his face lit up with genuine warmth. The executives watched in confusion as Amara translated his thoughts, bridging a gap they hadn't even tried to close. The conversation that followed shifted the mood of the entire room. For the first time, the investor spoke at length through Amara's hands. He asked questions, shared concerns, and even cracked a few subtle jokes that Amara conveyed with respectful accuracy. The people who had ignored him were now leaning forward, listening intently. As Amara continued to interpret, the once rigid negotiations began to feel like a genuine dialogue. By the time the dessert plates were cleared, The balance of power in the room had shifted. The investor now addressed Amara directly, trusting her to convey his words with sincerity. The executives, humbled, listened carefully as he outlined his vision for the partnership. Then came the moment that would define the night. He shared a story, in signs, with deliberate movements, about how his own company had once been dismissed by potential partners simply because of his deafness. He had built his empire not despite his disability, but because of it, having learned to value patience, empathy, and clarity in communication. As Amara translated his story, the room grew silent, the earlier arrogance replaced by quiet respect. The CEO of the host company looked down, realizing how close they had come to losing a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity because of their own lack of inclusion. Finally, the investor turned to Amara and signed a simple but powerful statement. This partnership would go forward because she had given him a reason to believe that this company could change. The executives erupted into applause. For a brief moment, the polished hierarchy of wealth and status crumbled as everyone acknowledged the courage of a young girl who had bridged a divide that millions of dollars in planning had failed to close. In that instant, the $1 billion deal that had seemed to be slipping away was sealed, not by the power of corporate leaders, but by the empathy of a maid's daughter. The news of the partnership made headlines the next day, but few outside the room knew the true story of how it had happened. The executives publicly praised the investors' leadership and their company's vision. Still, within the walls of that hotel ballroom, a new respect had formed for the overlooked voices that could change the course of history. Amara returned to her ordinary life with her mother, but the investor never forgot her. A week later, she received a personal letter thanking her for her courage and inviting her to apply for a scholarship at his Foundation for Young Leaders in Communication and Inclusion. For Clarissa, it was a moment of pride, proof that the world could still recognize the value of empathy and humanity in places where it was often overlooked. The experience also transformed the executives, who introduced new inclusion policies and sign language training programs in their company. What had begun as a business dinner turned into a powerful reminder that progress is not just about profit, but about understanding and valuing every human voice, even when it's spoken in silence. As for the viewers of this story, the takeaway was clear. Change often begins not with those in positions of power, but with those willing to step forward when no one else will. In a world still marked by divisions of race, class, and ability, one act of empathy bridged them all in a single evening. How many opportunities have we all missed because we failed to listen, not just with our ears, but with our hearts?